I love getting older people's perspective on this, and boy do I got a hell of a video to show you guys today. This video made my day yesterday. This woman is about to tell us how economic policies affected not only our dating lives, but also just work, the labor force. And she talks about how particularly I really don't like how they particularly talk about white men in this video, but it's not white men in general, it's just men, period. And we've all experienced problems because of the economic and political agendas that have been being pushed for the past 60 years. And she says some amazing things in this video. Funny things, eloquently explains some things. This video has just got everything, man. She's like one of my favorite people on the planet right now. So let's take a look at this, and she's going to tell us dateconomics, essentially how the economics have affected dating and the basic sentiment of white males, and how there are a large majority of young people right now that feel that they've been shafted. And it's not because they haven't, it's, we have been shafted, and it's not just males, it's all of us. We've been deceived for the last 50 years, and people are finally starting to wake up to it. And I'm just glad that other people are talking about this, because I've been talking about it for like the last 5 years. I feel like I was ahead of my time on stuff like this. Anyway, let's check it out.
Second half of today's economic update. I'm very pleased to bring back to our cameras and our microphones Dr. Harriet Fraad. She has been here before. You have been very interested and responsive to what she had to offer, and so we have brought her back. Dr. Fraad is a mental health counselor and hypnotherapist in practice in New York City. He appears often on radio, TV, and podcasts, speaking on the impact of economics and politics on personal life. Okay, you have been talking and writing recently about the particular plight, if I can call it that, of white male workers here in the United States.
You can call it that.
They're a very important group for obvious reasons, not the least of which is the fact that they seem to be the backbone of Mr. Trump's political support in the upcoming election, but for many other reasons as well. Could you tell us why that group is important in your work, and what about their situation strikes you as significant?
Well, they're very important because there's a huge transformation in their lives against which they are angrily protesting. Starting in the 1970s, technology, gas jet travel, computers, and faxes, artificial and robotic means allowed manufacturing to leave the United States and go to other countries, outsourcing.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason it went to over
this was where all the problems started. This was where your dad or your stepmom or your mom, whoever, got laid off when you were a kid from their job that they had been working at for 20 years, 25 years. My dad was getting ready to retire from a steel plant. He had like 3 years left to have a full retirement, and all of a sudden the steel plant decided to move to India, because why not? I mean, you raise taxes so much here in the United States to where big companies start looking and going, you know what? If we just move to China or India, we could do this for half of what we're doing it for here and make half more profit. And that's what happened. That's where everything went bad. We were at the time the biggest manufacturer on the planet. Now China, probably coming behind India, are the biggest manufacturers on the planet.
For greater profit. So they could go to places like Pakistan, India, China, where wages, China had the highest wages at $3.05 an hour, and where there were no ecological protections or no special demands like pensions and sick days and so on. So it was from which they made billions of dollars and then came in and bought our for sale political system.
Right. And now we're paying the price for it.
Instead of being the manufacturing center of the world, China, and to a lesser extent India, but China became the manufacturing center of the world. And white male workers who had unionized fought and often died for the rights to a good union wage with benefits, logical protections, lost it. They lost the advantages they had. They got what was called family wages.
I love this video. A family wage. This is also where the problems began. When I was growing up, my dad could take care of a household, him, woman, and myself. He already raised 3 kids before that on a manufacturing plant salary. Family wages, meaning you could take care of it from a manufacturing low skill job. You know, a job that doesn't require education, which everybody knows that's completely gone now. You know, if you don't have legitimate education and skills, you will be making minimum wage, or, you know, which I consider anything from like $10 to $17 an hour. But let's continue here.
Certainly, they got family wages, which means that white male workers got enough money to support a dependent wife and children. So they had a full-time servant who was there taking care of them.
Listen, man, please don't get hung up on the fact that she said servant, you guys. She's making a point that men had emotional, men had a woman to take care of the other needs that men couldn't really take care of because they were at work. You know, she's explaining how men had someone to that was cooperative and would help them and to take care of the other needs that, you know, the man necessarily couldn't take care of. And this balanced the system out. It gave men a reason to go out and get a job and work hard. And so, yeah, I think her delivery on that was, you know, that she's going to get some pushback for sure on the servant part, but it gets better. Let's continue.
Taking care of their sexual needs, taking care of their domestic labor, cooking and cleaning and arranging and creating opportunities for them to socialize with their relatives and friends and meeting their sexual needs as well. Well, once that was a huge privation.
Lose that.
Lose that.
The
Exactly.
full-time servant care of you, which in the male gender role, men were not supposed to take care of their own feelings. In fact, they weren't supposed to admit them except
Right.
to their sex partner. And that was certainly lessened. I will explain that. And they weren't taught that they were responsible for their own domestic labor, to cook, to clean, to create an aesthetic environment, to create their own social networks, to invite friends over,
Right.
relatives. All those were allocated to dependent women. Well,
I know you guys aren't there's gonna be women, oh my God, I want to be dependent. Like, she's not saying this in a derogatory way. If you think that, just get off of my channel. You don't have the mind for this conversation.
once men were denied a family wage because millions and millions of their jobs were outsourced, women had to go out and work
Exactly.
outside the home as well as within it in order to make ends meet.
Right.
Well, if women are working outside the home, they're much less enthusiastic about a second shift of taking care of men's emotional, social, domestic, child care, and sexual care.
Okay, let me then,
Right.
if I get it. The men suffer a kind of 1-2 punch. They lose the job, union, income protections that they had enjoyed.
More like a 1, 2, 3, 4.
But they also,
And it's continuing today.
lose their position inside the home relative to the family and the wife.
Yeah, I mean, if you give any person double the responsibility that they have now, the previous responsibility that they had probably becomes, you know, a little bit less important. They're going to prioritize the more important things over the less important things. And she's explaining how, like, women used to be the ones that controlled, like, would take care of the emotional aspects, inviting friends over, making sure you, while you're at work, she's staying in touch with your family, making sure you guys plan things and have get-togethers and stuff like that. This used to be the primary women's role. And when you take that away and essentially trick women into going to work, which is basically what happened. Here you guys go, freedom, go fucking slave at a job. It just throws off the whole balance of which is what balanced the system. For the longest time, men risked their lives, men went to work, men did these things for for the possibility of getting a good woman, having some kids with her to, continue your progeny or whatever. And yeah, this started back in like the 60s and 70s, you guys, and we are facing all of it now. There was just too many, societal changes pushed on society too fast that we just never recovered from. And it gets better, some of the shit she says.
Because she has to go out to compensate for the lost jobs and income.
That's right. And there wasn't a men's liberation movement. Help men learn the things that they didn't have to learn because they were allocated to women. And they suffered. And
right.
Another thing that added to their suffering was the anti-communism of the United States. After World War II, the onslaught that deported and jailed anyone who was communist, socialist, or left, and kicking out the left out of the labor unions, which meant a lot of the spark of the labor unions was gone, so they didn't have that, and men were denied. There was a joke in the 50s and 60s. There's a handy little thing called a wife. You screw it on the bed, it does all the housework and the child care. Great, right?
Let's listen to that again.
If women, there was a joke in the 50s and 60s. There's a handy little thing called a wife. You screw it on the bed, it does all the housework and the child care, right?
Oh my God, I love her. My God, she did not say that. There's this handy little thing called a wife. You screw it on the bed, it does all the housework. Oh, sorry.
Was the anti-communism of the United States. After World War II, the onslaught that deported and jailed anyone who was communist, socialist, or left, and kicking out the left out of the labor unions, which meant a lot of the spark of the labor unions was gone, so they didn't have that, and men were denied. There was a joke in the 50s and 60s. There's a handy little thing called a wife. You screw it on the bed, it does all the housework and the child care. Great, right? Well, that wasn't a
joke, you guys. It was a joke, okay? From a 60s, 50s joke.
And we're bereft. In 1965, women got 59% of the male wage. Black women got 44%, but all women together, and the country was mainly white then. You couldn't support your partners yourself, no less dependent children on that wage.
Right.
And women were angry.
And so
what he was saying was women used to get roughly 55 to 49% of the money anyway from the man. The man would come home, a lot of times the woman would be the one that took care of the bills and stuff. So the man would just give his paycheck to the woman. He knew that she would take care of everything, And that is completely dead nowadays.
is the following a reasonable inference. The position of white men, particularly workers, particularly those in unionized, good and well-paying jobs, is declining for the reasons you've given us. And the women are, in a sense, rising through the women's liberation movement, but also the social imposition that they have to go out and work and now dress and carry themselves and go get an education. So, in a sense, I don't want to overdo this, the position of the white male is diminished in the culture, and the position of the white woman is raised in the culture,
Yeah, in other words, this is what I've been saying forever. Men have been hyper demasculized while women have been hyper masculated over the past, 50, 60 years. And it's just now to where women and like this are understand this and about how big of a problem it is.
To set them against each other. In other words, for the men to blame the rise of the women as if that were their problem, especially if there's no left to teach them, no, this is the way capitalism is working.
That's exactly right. Now, black women have a slightly different story because black men never got a family wage. So black women had to be more independent and bring income into the connection.
That makes
And
sense.
they have been more independent. But what you have the overwhelming mass of women who are white being forced into the labor force
Right.
and no longer enthusiastic about doing a second job when they get home.
Exactly.
And therefore, that second job is less available.
And of course, now it's gotten a lot worse where women just are choosing not to, date at all. Or if they do date, they're like, if I don't find the absolute best life has to offer, the rich man that can take care of my every single need and keep me in delirious, happy mood all the time, then I just won't date. And, in a sense, you have to understand this, and when you think about it, you're like, I don't blame them. They have to do the same job as a man now, but then they're expected to come home and still be a wife. And, it's not fair to any of us.
Like, look at now, 70% of divorces are initiated by women. And
Right.
wives.
Exactly what I just said. They don't want blue-collar men anymore. They'll tell you that outright. No, firefighters, electricians, skilled trade workers, nope, they're not good enough. Those are average blue-collar workers. We need the rich, high-value man. If not, it's not even worth it, and I'm worth more. And
There's no point in being in a relationship with somebody who demands all sorts of free service and doesn't even support her.
Right.
It's changed. And so a man loses his family. Also, it should be noted that within the very curtailing and sad male gender stereotype, men don't have emotional friends. When
That's
women
true, too.
are not, they do what they've always done, get their emotional needs met from friends who are
Exactly. When I was out the other night talking to people for the channel, I noticed a lot more groups of men out. Just 4 or 5 guys hanging out with their buddies, drinking some beers, no women around. They're not approaching women. They're not trying to approach women. They're just out hanging out. They're playing Jenga together and shit at local bars. They've completely given up on the idea of a woman.
or from relatives who are women, because the emotional world was a female world.
Still is.
Men lose their emotional connection, they lose their sexual connection, they lose their primacy at the job. It used to be if you were in a factory town, as you got seniority, you got to be seen as an important senior worker.
Right.
Now you're part of an anonymous group working, or if you used to have a little business, your little hardware store, no, that's replaced by Home Depot or Walmart, and Walmart replaces everything else, and you are a minimum wage worker. And
That's another problem in the world, man. It really, like, whether you want to admit it or not, Walmart, Home Depot, Lowe's, these are as well be monopolies. If not monopolies, they're definitely oligopolies.
so men stopped mattering. Women had to advance ourselves because we had to survive.
Exactly. And just now, women are starting to be pissed off about it. Finally. They've realized, listen, we got a raw deal. They tricked us into joining the workforce, essentially, because we're 80% of the consumer market. And they basically tricked us into joining the workforce, and they told us we would be, this would make us more important, this would make us more valuable. And the reality is that it didn't.
People of color for taking white male jobs because the capitalists took them with their anti-communism and outsource it, you know.
It helps to understand then why a slogan like MAGA.
Anybody know what
In a
that
sense,
means?
You're telling us that invoking a past America, idealized, cleansed of all of its problems, yeah, for sure, but nonetheless it is speaking to white, older male workers about a lost world confronting an uppity world that has demands of women and people of color, who together are a majority of the population.
Now,
And you begin to see the Trump-Biden version of this kind of splitting the society apart.
yes, because make America sexist and racist again, and give America, they don't mention the part, give America its jobs back. And those people whose jobs Trump promised he doesn't deliver. I was very impressed by a line in one of Harley Hochschild's books about the South, where a man says, look, I know Trump won't deliver what he says, but he understands me. He has my feelings, and Trump is always acting like he's the victim. Whatever outrage is going on, even as he got 91 felony counts against him, he's the victim, even though he raped Jean Carroll.
Yeah, I think that's an allegation, but okay. I like her.
He resonates with men who feel deprived
Right.
and who are in a gender stereotype which is as macho as Trump.
I wish we had more time, as I do with so many of our guests, but you really very eloquently explained a great deal of the politics,
I'd say eloquently.
the economics in our society. The only comment I would add, and before we adjourn, is that the underlying message here is that white and black, men and women, have been shaped into their conflicts with one another, even in the intimacies of the household,
Right.
by the evolution of a profit-driven capitalism. That's the part of the story that's missing so often, and the part that
You know,
Dr. Fraud's
I hate that.
presentation
I don't like that because capitalism is not the problem. There are many people who feel that capitalism is the problem here. Capitalism is the best system that we have came up with so far. It is the most fair economic system that we have came up with so far. If you can come up with a better one, please do. But capitalism isn't the problem. Capitalism worked fine. Raising the taxes so much in the United States to where these companies had no choice but to look in other countries for better places to set up a manufacturing plant was the problem. That was the issue, not capitalism itself. The ignorant economic policies that politicians put into place all the way back into the 60s and 70s, starting this ball rolling, was the problem. He mentions one other thing in this thing about, in the beginning here, I'm not going to scroll through to try to find it, but he mentions the birth rate and the collapsing birth rate and how big of a problem this is. And he mentions how big of, the reason why it's so big of a problem is because the only way to, fight against the decreasing population is to allow a ass ton of illegal immigrants into the country, which is what they're doing now. It's the only way to fight the population decrease that we're going to face in the future. And also, it's the only way to fight people like me who have woken up to the BS, people like them who have woken up to the BS. I am that liberals and immigrants are how Biden got elected, along with probably a little bit of cheating. But I'm convinced of that, man. Like, they thought that Trump was going to go on this another deportation scandal and deport all of them. So they got scared, and Biden called to the lower economic classes. He appealed to the lower economic classes, like immigrants and don't know any better, and it worked. He tricked them into voting for him, and I don't think he has a chance of that happening again this time. But yeah, this video kind of goes into some of the problems that I've been talking about for the longest time, and I'm just glad to see like actual economists and people with, you know, like real doctors and stuff talking about this, how big a problem this really is in our country. I appreciate you guys checking this out. Please subscribe. I'd appreciate it. It would help me. I don't make $1 from doing this. I'm broke. Thanks.